Buenas tardes. This is knowledge time. Welcome, alchemists. Before I get into the book, I'm currently out in South America until the 4th of February. So, this is my second broadcast from South America. Let's jump into it. Okay, I'll be reading from chapter 5. Let me go back. I'll be reading from the book, The Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. I am in chapter 5. This is part 2, Keys to Human Nature. By nature, we humans are not easily contented with our circumstances. By some perverse force within us, the moment we possess something or get what we want, our minds begin to drift towards something new and different. To imagine we can have better, the more distant and unattainable this new object, the greater is our desire to have it. We can call this the grass is always greener syndrome, the psychological equivalent of an optical illusion. If we get too close to the grass, to that new object, we see that is not really so green after all. This syndrome has very deep roots in our nature. The earliest recorded example can be found in the Old Testament, in the story of the Exodus from Egypt, chosen by God to bring the Hebrews into the Promised Land. Moses led them into the wilderness, where they would wander for 40 years. In Egypt, the Hebrews had served as slaves, and their lives had been difficult. Once they suffered hardships in the desert, however, they suddenly grew nostalgic from their previous life, facing starvation. God provided them with manna from heaven, but they could only compare it unfavorably to the delicious melons and cucumbers and meats they had known in Egypt. Not sufficiently excited by God's other miracles, the parting of the Red Sea, for example, they decided to forage and worship a golden calf. But once Moses punished them for this, they quickly dropped their interest in this new idol. All along the way, they gripped and complained, giving Moses endless headaches. The men lusted after foreign women. The people kept looking for some new cult to follow. God himself was so irritated by their endless discontent that he barred his entire generation, including Moses, from ever entering the Promised Land. But even after the next generation established itself in the land of milk and honey, the grumbling continued unabated. Whatever they had, they dreamed of something better over the horizon. Closer to home, we can see this syndrome at work in our daily lives. We continually look at other people who seem to have it better than us. Their parents were more loving, their careers more exciting, their lives easier. We may be in a perfectly satisfying relationship, but our minds continually wander toward a new person, someone who doesn't have the very real flaws of our partner, or so we think. We dream of being taken out of our boring life by traveling to some culture that is exotic and where people are just happier than in the grimy city where we live. The moment we have a job, we imagine something better. On a political level, our government is corrupt, and we need some real change, perhaps a revolution. In this revolution, we imagine a veritable utopia that replaces the imperfect world we live in. We don't think of the vast majority of revolutions in history in which the results were more of the same, or something worse. In all these cases, if we got closer to the people we envy, to that supposed happy family, to the other man or woman we covet, to the exotic natives in a culture we wish to know, to that better job, to that utopia, we could see through the illusion. And often when we act on these desires, we realize this is our disappointment. But it doesn't change our behavior. the next object glittering in the distance, the next exotic cult or get rich quick scheme will inevitably seduce us. One of the most striking examples of this syndrome is the view we take of our childhood as it recedes into the past. Most of us remember a golden time of play and excitement. Nintendo for me. As we get older, it becomes even more golden in our memory. Of course, we conveniently forget the anxieties, insecurities, and hurts that plagued us in childhood and more than likely consume more of our mental space than the fleeting pleasures we remember. But because our youth is an object that grows more distant as we age, we are able to idealize it and see it as greener than green. Such a syndrome can be explained by three qualities of the human brain. The first is known as induction, how something positive generates a contrasting negative image in our mind. This is most obvious in our visual system. When we see some color, red or black for instance, it tends to intensify our perception of the opposite color around us. In this case, green or white. As we look at the red object, we often can see a golden halo forming around it. In general, the mind operates by contrast. We are able to formulate concepts by becoming aware of its opposite. The brain is continually dredging up these contrasts. What this means is that whenever we see or imagine something, our minds cannot help but see or imagine the opposite. If we are forbidden by our culture to think a particular thought or entertain a particular desire, that taboo instantly brings to mind the very thing we are forbidden. Every no sparks a corresponding yes. It was the outlawing of pornography in Victorian times that created the first pornographic industry. We cannot control this vacillation in the mind between contrasts. This predisposes us to think about and then desire exactly what we do not have. Second, complacency would be a dangerous evolutionary trait for a conscious animal such as humans. If our early ancestors had been prone to feeling content with present circumstances, they would not have been sensitive enough to possible dangers that lurked in the most apparently safe environments. We survived and thrived through our continual conscious alertness, which predispose us to thinking and imagining the possible negative in any circumstance. We no longer live in savannas or forests teeming with life-threatening predators and natural dangers, but our brains are wired as if we were. We are inclined, therefore, toward a continual negative bias, which often consciously is expressed through complaining and griping. Finally, what is real and what is imagined are both experienced similarly in the brain. This has been demonstrated through various experiments in which subjects who imagine something produce electrical and chemical activity in their brains that is remarkably similar to when they actually live out what they are imaging. All of this shown through functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI. Reality can be quite harsh and is full of limits and problems. We all must die. Every day we grow older and less strong. To become successful requires sacrifice and hard work. But in our imagination, we can voyage beyond these limits and entertain all kinds of possibilities. Our imagination is essentially limitless, and what we imagine has almost the force of what we actually experience. And so we become creatures who are continually prone to imagining something better than present circumstances and feeling some pleasure in the release from reality that our imagination brings us. All of this makes the grass is always greener syndrome inevitable in our psychological makeup. We should not moralize or complain about this possible flaw in human nature. It is a part of the mental life of each one of us, and it has many benefits. It is the source of our ability to think of new possibilities and innovate. It is what has it is what has made our imagination such a powerful instrument. And on the flip side, it is the material out of which we can move, excite, and seduce people. Knowing how to work on people's natural covetedness is a timeless art that we depend on for all forms of persuasion. The problem we face today is not that people have suddenly stopped coveting, but quite the opposite. That we are losing our connection to this art and the power that goes with it. We see evidence of this in our culture. We live in an age of bombardment and saturation. Advertisers blanket us with their messages and brand presence, directing us here and there to click and buy. Movie bull, bulge, bulging on us over the head, attacking our senses. Politicians are masters at stirring up and exploiting our discontent with present circumstances, but they have no sense of how to spark our imagination about the future. In all of these cases, subtlety is sacrificed, and all of this has an overall hardening effect on our imagination, which secretly craves something else. We see evidence of this in personal relationships as well. More and more people have come to believe that others should simply desire them for who they are. This means revealing as much as they can about themselves, exposing all of their likes and dislikes, and making themselves as familiar as possible. They leave no room for imagination or fantasy, and when the man or woman they want loses interest in them, they go online to rant at the superficiality of men or the frecklelessness of women, increasingly self-absorbed. See chapter 2. We find it harder than ever to get into the psychology of the other person, to imagine what they want from us instead of what we want from them. Understand, people may point to all of this as evidence that we humans are becoming more honest and truthful, but human nature does not change within a few generations. People have become more obvious and forthright, not out of some deep moral calling, but out of increasing self absorption and overall laziness. It requires no effort to simply be oneself or to blast one's message, and the lack of effort simply results in a lack of effect on other people's psychology. It means that people's interest in you will be paper thin. Their attention will quickly move on, and you will not see the reason for this. Do not swallow the easy moralism of the day, which urges honesty at the expense of desirability. Go in the opposite direction. With so few people out there who understand the art of desirability, it affords you endless opportunities to shine and exploit people repressed fantasies. In closing, subscribe to the channel, comment any questions you have, like if the information was inspiring for you, and share this knowledge with other alchemists. Also, follow me on Instagram for more progressive knowledge. You can find me at Max underscore Bugatti underscore 8008. I'm all about family first. I'm a global stock investor. I'm a filmmaker. I'm an aerospace botanist, and I have I'm all about masculine confidence building. And currently, I'm out here in Cali, Colombia. While you're slaying dragons, I'll be taming them.